Most of us have found ourselves at some time or another in a downtown setting dealing with a grid system consumed by one-way streets. And such is how it is in downtown Portland, Oregon. We've all experienced it personally, or perhaps been with another driver who was experiencing it. It's a love-hate kind of thing that most of us don't really think about till we're there and we miss that turn. Now, we not only need to find the next turn spot, but then we need to figure out our way back to where we intended on going in the first place. When I got my driver's license, I drove all over the place, except downtown. I was just convinced I was going to get into a car accident, but I did eventually kind of get over that, and got used to dealing with one-way traffic, which is good because this is going to be the story of how Portland's one-way traffic system in downtown came to be, what led up to it, the complications, the successes. A change that, at the time, really needed to happen. Simply put, post-World War II America experienced a boom in multiple ways, one of which was a spike in the auto market. But it's not that this suddenly happened unexpectedly. In Portland, even before the war was over, they were already reflecting on the future in terms of the automobile. The origins of the one-way grid system that would take effect in 1950 was 8 years in the making, according to the driving force behind it, traffic engineer Fred Fowler, perhaps best known for being the mind behind the Vista Avenue Viaduct. This shows that as far back as 1942 and even earlier, the city was dealing with the issue of traffic congestion, primarily in the downtown area where most of the city's commerce was located. The summer of 1940 saw the creation of the city's Traffic Safety Commission, made in response to the city's rather lackadaisical history of keeping commuters safe on the streets. An article introducing the commission expressed a declaration of war on death, with a listing at the top of all the people who had died in car-related accidents in Portland during just the first 6 months of 1940. This really planted the seeds for something like Fred Fowler's one-way system to come about. By 1945, Fowler had been working for the city of Portland for almost 25 years, and at the position of traffic engineer, the ever-growing issue of traffic congestion in the downtown area was more than just an issue to be dealt with for him. Not only was there a congestion issue, but car accidents had been a major issue in town dating back into the 1920s. In downtown's notoriously short city blocks, 200 feet by 200 feet when most cities were at least 250 feet or longer, was just another added issue. Fewer cars fitting into a given city block. Fowler personally felt bridge traffic was the primary cause of congestion in downtown, with lots of traffic coming in and out of town that way. Portland just happened to be one of those cities where a river divided the majority of commerce on the west side from the majority of residences on the east side, meaning most people were taking the bridges to get to work and then taking them to get back home. The Morrison Bridge was also in need of replacement, something that would not happen until 1958. The recent opening of Harbor Drive along the river had an added objective of alleviating traffic on the steel bridge, which was also dumping traffic onto busy Gleason Street. And not only was downtown the main hub of city commerce, meaning many workers were coming and going daily, it was also a prime shopping and hospitality area as well, bringing in lots of pedestrians, not there for work. In fact, a key issue in regards to congestion was the amount of foot traffic happening on a daily basis in the downtown area, with sometimes hordes of people crossing a given street forcing potentially already backed up traffic to wait even longer. Some mild criticism would also be pointed towards public transportation vehicles, which, considering their girth and frequent stops, were something else that had a tendency to slow traffic. And with so many businesses in the area, delivery vehicles often had to stop and unload their merchandise while parked at least partially in a lane of traffic. While not considered a primary issue, these delivery vehicles did bear a small percentage of the blame for the city's congestion. At its heart, there were two very important issues that needed to be dealt with. There was alleviating traffic through downtown in general, but there was also the acknowledgement that a massive increase in parking was needed in downtown to accommodate not only vehicles now, or 1945, but also the increase of vehicles in the future. The coming years would see numerous buildings of varying levels of historical significance demolished to make space for parking. This would even include the iconic Portland Hotel, demolished in 1951 and converted to parking before ultimately becoming Portland's living room, Pioneer Courthouse Square. Look at some pictures of 1950s and even 1960s downtown, and you'll see all the places consisting of just parking, along with those kooky pigeonhole parking structures. While this parking issue would be, to a degree, dealt with in the coming years, the congestion issue was not something willing to wait that much longer. City Commissioner William A. Bowes personally expressed that the congestion issue was the #1 problem in the city that needed to be dealt with. A smog problem was also developing over the city, and Fred Fowler's idea to help combat all of this? To establish a one-way traffic system for downtown. This objectively would move traffic faster through that area, alleviating congestion on the city streets as well as with bridge traffic. The original area that would be converted for this system, which would grow over time, originally had the boundaries of Front and 10th Avenues and Cooch and Columbia Streets. In particular, at the start, there was talk of converting Columbia and Jefferson Streets to one-way traffic to provide a faster commute between Harbor Drive and Canyon Road, which Jefferson connected to prior to Highway 26 passing through there. Columbia would have eastbound traffic while Jefferson's would be westbound. With these east and west traveling routes, consideration was also made for converting 18th and 19th Avenues into one-way stretches between Burnside and Vaughn Streets to allow for quicker commute from Burnside up to Highway 30 or the Lower Columbia River Highway. In late 1946, the system of Columbia and Jefferson being converted to one-way traffic was put into effect, hopefully to provide a small test of how one-way downtown traffic would work out. But unfortunately, the city got a little ahead of itself, opening these one-way routes before necessary traffic lights were put in. This prevented any stoppage of traffic on Columbia and Jefferson, which in turn created more traffic congestion on crossing streets, in particular at Jefferson and Broadway. The problem would ultimately be fixed, and later on a traffic circle would be created at Jefferson and 18th, allowing for traffic on Jefferson and Columbia to come together. Happening at 18th Avenue also allowed traffic to funnel north at this spot along 18th, which eventually splits to become 18th and 19th when it hits Burnside, thus creating a steady route from the Goose Hollow area all the way up to Highway 30 on the north end of town. The land contributed for this circle was parkland, but fortunately the circle was converted into a small park, known today as Jefferson Street City Park. Perhaps the two strongest objections to a one-way system came down to 1, the many businessmen and merchants in the downtown area who feared a change in the traffic system and how that might affect their business, and 2, a desire by Fred Fowler and those who supported the system to have the streetcars that pass through downtown removed in favor of buses, which would move faster and not take up as much space. 3 particular streetcar lines were referenced in this case: 23rd Avenue, Willamette Heights, and Council Crest. The Council Crest one is an oddity to me. Perhaps those better in the know of Portland's streetcar system and its history may know different, but every map and diagram I've ever seen of Portland's streetcar system doesn't show the Council Crest line passing through the part of town that would convert to this one-way system. Maps show it went down 23rd Avenue, which would become Vista Avenue, and then it climbed into the hills, but elements of this one-way system never went beyond 19th Avenue. But again, maybe this line followed a different route once upon a time. The 23rd Avenue line also traveled on 23rd, obviously, but went along 1st Avenue before turning down Washington Street, merging into Burnside Street before turning up 23rd. Thus, it went right through where the one-way system would take place, as did the Willamette Heights line. This line traveled up Morrison before turning north onto 19th and meandering its way up into the Heights area. A key factor in wanting to remove streetcars from this area was due to how narrow many of the downtown streets were. Fowler also called for the replacement buses to also follow one-way routes, whether a full-on one-way system was ever implemented. This way, the buses would not have to pass each other along these narrow streets. This streetcar and bus system was run at the time by the Portland Traction Company. And while this company would approve of a one-way system for the most part from day one, the streetcar situation would remain an issue for the next couple years. Gordon Steele, president of the Traction Company, would even say in 1945 that if immediate improvement is not provided, the condition would cause disastrous results to downtown Portland. He was talking about implementing a one-way street system. At this time, the plan was also reportedly in place to replace these streetcars with buses within a year, something that did not happen. About a year later, December 1947, it was also reported that the Traction Company was only awaiting a few new coach buses that, once they arrived, would allow the one-way system to go forward, but with the understanding that those 3 streetcar lines would not be removed. This would require the purchasing of even more buses, which the company would have to obtain through financing alone. This would mean the establishment of a one-way system, officially introduced in 1945, would not be in place by the start of 1948. With no real progress, by the start of 48, the only changes made to the plan involved what streets were affected. In January 1946, the west boundary of the system would be extended from 10th to 13th Avenue. Within the boundaries of this system, Harbor Drive, Front Avenue, and Burnside Street would remain two-way routes. The plan was simple, affordable, and was submitted by Fowler to Commissioner Bowes with the hopes of it going into effect by early 1947. But even a year past that, January 1948, and the project was still at a standstill. In this month, a study was conducted in relation to this plan, which bumped the plan up to the city's Transportation Planning Commission, the last obstruction before reaching the City Council for possible approval. By this time, the plan had achieved substantial backing, even by several merchants in the downtown area. Come June 1948, the one-way system would be adopted by the City Council, and in December, the plan would be officially approved after having a public hearing on the matter. And the adoption of this plan could not have come at a better time for its proponents, as come January 1st, 1949, the city would have a new mayor. The city's first female mayor, Dorothy McCullough Lee, would prove an immediate force behind making this one-way system a reality. With her in place and with the plan officially adopted, some further changes happened to iron everything out. Namely, by this point, the projected cost of the project for the city would be about $75,000, fairly affordable for such an life-altering project. That was part of its charm, was how economic it was. Ultimately, the whole project would cost upwards of $126,000, but this was with new additions. All of the necessary new signage alone was projected to cost around $20,000, with the relocation of 1,500 parking meters, including an added cost of $4,500. The largest cost in all of this was the new light and crossing signals that would be necessary, costing in excess of $50,000. At this point, it was also noted that all of the odd-numbered streets would be northbound traffic, while the even-numbered streets would be southbound traffic. But this must have changed, as today, the reversal of this is the case. It was also reported that the system was going to be developed in sections, something that would also be abandoned for an all-at-once opening, which was likely for the best. Imagine, periodically, sections of downtown being converted to one-way traffic. It would have been total chaos. Beyond this, a 19-point platform was established, showing the counterbalance between having this new system compared to things as they were. The benefits of this new system under this platform included, but was not limited to, left turns becoming easier with no delay, an increased average speed for vehicles, less congestion around parking areas, less congestion around bridges, fewer instances of start-stop traffic, more parking on the street options, and no headlight glare from oncoming traffic. A Chicago-based engineering firm called DeLue, Cather & Company was brought in to do further analysis on Portland's congestion issue and what should be done about it. In the end, their support of a one-way system was so strong that they felt any other possible idea should be abandoned immediately. The momentum was strong and growing. But still an obstruction: the downtown streetcar issue. Once the city council approved the system, Mayor Lee put the pressure on the Portland Traction Company, telling them that their delay of this project would not be tolerated. In June of '49, the council would have hearings to try and figure this situation out, in the end calling for replacing the streetcars with buses by October 1st. The traction company was resistant to this, with Gordon Steele saying nothing short of protests would follow. Part of the traction company's problem, simply put, was that they were not in a great financial position at this time, and it would have cost them around $600,000 to get the buses they needed to replace their streetcars, money they did not have. And beyond that, at this time they were co-defendants with Portland General Electric in a $3 million tax suit that left them in danger of having to shell out even more money. But the city and Mayor Lee were not budging. At least, not much. The traction company was able to extend from the start of October to late November, but even then, in late August, they asked for a 90-day extension beyond that, an extension that would ultimately be granted. While the city was playing hardball, the traction company had one thing on their side: the people needed their public transportation, and if the buses weren't available and the streetcars were going to stop running by force, what happens next? And by this time, the planned start date for the one-way system to go into effect was November 25th. With the 90-day extension granted, this start date was moved to late February 1950, with an official date ultimately set for February 27th. Despite all of these delays, in the end, the traction company established for themselves a fleet of buses that set Portland as having the finest transportation in the country, according to some. But still, when those streetcars made their final runs in late February 1950, it was considered a time of sadness for many who had been taking those streetcars for years. Many made the effort to take one last ride, and on the final day, several people lined the routes that the three vanishing lines took to take photographs of those final rides. And just like that, they were gone. And there was a lot of prep work to be done beforehand with the rest of the project, obviously. All of the new signs and lights needed to go up. Signs were either put up and covered up to be revealed later, or frames were put into place for signs to be attached to right before the system went into effect. But even at this point, with everything set in stone, there was still an attitude among some that this was an experiment that could easily be reversed. Mayor Lee was quick to say this was not the case. Even by then, a petition was going around in these later months looking to get a year delay on the project. But it was too late to stop now. And the city had more important things to worry about. More than anything, doing their utmost to make sure its citizens were prepared for what was to come. It was already accepted that there would be at least a few weeks of adjusting, but the fewer drivers accidentally going in the wrong direction, the better. Drivers were also being encouraged early on to, whenever they were on a 3-lane stretch, to stay in the center lane if they were traveling long distances, to keep the left and right lanes open for those making turns. And pedestrians walking the streets had to know just as well. One of the greatest concerns about implementing this plan related to how people instinctively would look left at first before crossing a street. But with all traffic going in one direction, people would need to learn to sometimes look right first before stepping into the street. In those final days leading up to implementation, a large portion of the police force, 124 officers in all, was relegated to downtown to help things go as smoothly as possible. About a quarter of the city's whole patrol force was stationed there. Most of these officers were stationed on the perimeters of where the system was implemented to make sure when cars entered the area that they were all going in the right direction. Once entering the area, the hopes were that the drivers would be able to conduct themselves accordingly, but if they couldn't, there was a smattering of officers scattered in downtown to monitor traffic and hopefully prevent any traffic jams. The city had prepared for everything, or just about everything. I guess sometimes when you've got a major project going into effect with lots of moving parts, things sometimes just slip the mind. The plan was to spend Sunday, February 26th, putting all the signs up and having everything ready for the system to go into effect the next day. With so many to put up, work on putting signs up under a one-way system got going early that Sunday. Well, as these signs started popping up around town, some drivers understood they were just preparations for the following day, but others thought the system was officially up and running when they saw those signs. Hence, some were treating the streets as two-way while others as one-way. Cars were driving in opposite directions, towards one another, all over town. It's a shock there weren't several accidents. The same issue happened with parked cars, with some cars facing the wrong way, some nose to nose, some assuming the one-way system had fully gone into effect. Even 2 county sheriff's vehicles were found to be parked facing the wrong way due to the confusion, and they were given written warnings. By around noontime, police just began enforcing the one-way system as the best method to hopefully prevent any further confusion. So, technically, the system went into effect almost a full day early. And it seems everyone was a good sport about the whole thing. Come Monday, the official first day, the system ran about as smoothly as one could hope. For the most part, the 124 officers on scene had little to do with the most frequent mistake made by drivers being making improper turns. Namely, cars in the middle lane cutting across the right or left lanes to make turns. It seemed to just be a case of people not used to driving the same direction in 3 lanes of traffic. You gotta remember, this is the pre-freeway world. And even the new buses that replaced the streetcars, with more frequent stops, still made it through the one-way grid area at a speed faster than the old streetcars. There were only 2 reported car accidents on that first official day, one at 5th and Columbia and the other at 12th and Stark. Not bad for the first day. In terms of traffic congestion, the only real issue stemmed from backed up traffic at 4th and Gleason. At this point, Gleason was a 2-way street east of 3rd Avenue, but 1-way west of there for westbound traffic. Thus, several cars got stuck around 4th Avenue, wanting to go east on Gleason to cross the steel bridge to the east side of town. In the moment, to make it easier, Gleason was briefly changed to 2-way traffic from 4th Avenue, going east. But still, it was a successful first day, more successful than was projected. With immediate signs of traffic moving at a faster rate and congestion on the decrease, the system was met with widespread approval among locals. Burdette Glenn, traffic engineer at University of California and an associate of Fred Fowler, monitored the early progress of this plan and said, "I never saw anything run off so smoothly in all my life." Fowler himself would report, after a couple months, a 15% increase in the number of cars going through downtown, made possible by the fact that cars were moving through there faster. And most local merchants and businessmen had a positive initial reaction to the system, while still reserving their final judgment to see how the new system affected their businesses over time. It appears drivers adjusting to the change in traffic, which was the greatest cause for concern ahead of time, ended up not being all that dramatic. Again, a lot of it came down to adjusting old habits. In particular, it took some time for vehicles to get used to traveling in left lanes, as people are used to driving on the right side of the road. This habit was so strong that cars would sometimes pile up in the right lane, even if the lane to their immediate left was wide open. In those first weeks, pedestrians were almost more of a problem, with people not paying close enough attention or monitoring new cross signals. And it appears, shortly after the system went into effect, with a windstorm blowing into town, it flipped a sign, creating a rather confusing situation for some commuters. After time to let the new system kick in for everyone, in late April, about 2 months after its implementation, several locals were surveyed on how they felt traffic had improved or worsened in the downtown area. 77% expressed they felt it had improved, with only 6% saying it had gotten worse. Car accidents still occurred, with the first decrease in accidents not being reported until May, a few months after implementation, but that's to be expected with so many people experiencing a new system in a cramped downtown area. And also, while the system took effect in late February, there was still work being done afterwards, such as several intersections getting new traffic lights, which created some extra congestion in downtown of its own. May 1950 saw a 2% drop in traffic accidents compared to May 1949, but also saw a 41% drop in traffic accidents with injuries compared to 1949, and a 59% drop in pedestrian-related accidents compared to May 1949. Come the end of the year, the Oregon Daily Journal did a poll asking people what the most interesting change to happen in the city over the past year was, and more than a third said it was the implementation of the one-way grid system in downtown. In September 1952, it was further reported that downtown area traffic accidents were down nearly 50% since the one-way system went into effect. This is impressive considering the fact that by this time even more traffic was going through there. The success of the program helped inspire one-way systems to take effect in surrounding areas, such as the Multnomah neighborhood and down in Oregon City. While the grid area was primarily restricted to the area ultimately between 14th Avenue and the waterfront, and then Columbia and Hoyt Streets, there were outliers to this and other locations in the vicinity of downtown that were converted to one-way over time. As of today, one-way streets go as far south as Mill Street and as far west as 19th Avenue. North of Hoyt, there are various stretches that go one way, going as far north as Pettygrove Street. These particular stretches have a variety of reasons that they were converted to one way, such as making space for our present-day streetcar lines and for bike lanes. For its time, one cannot argue against the success of this system in the downtown Portland area, something that had already been a success in other cities before then. Of course, there were a lot less people around, meaning whatever system was put into place, it was likely to peak in its success in its earliest years with fewer cars on the road. In fact, even by 1970, it was being reported that traffic congestion was once again a major issue in the downtown area. But what were they going to do? Go back to a two-way system? That certainly wouldn't have alleviated things. And, as we all know, it's not just downtown. Traffic is a headache all over the city today for a multitude of different reasons. And with increased commerce on the east side over the decades, for many, traffic in downtown is the least of their problems. And sure, the downtown area can still be a hassle to get around in, but this is due to a combination of things, some of which can't be helped, such as the city's short block lengths. And furthermore, today, I think the average commuter is much more frustrated by a lack of affordable parking than the traffic itself in downtown. The traffic is something that can be worked with, at least for most, and the implementation of this new system still has effects today. And had it not been put into place when it was, who knows what the traffic situation would have been like going into the 1950s. And more important than anything was the fact that this new system led to a decrease in accidents. That's the major takeaway here. Fewer accidents, creating financial constraints on those owning cars and those pedestrians getting injured, and most important, fewer drivers and pedestrians suffering injuries from accidents, or even worse, death.